The sun vanished. Snow fell in summer. The harvests died. And then, the plague came. In the year 536 AD, the sky darkened for almost 2 years. A dense cloud covered the world. The sun no longer shone. Temperatures plunged. Hunger became the norm. The air smelled of death. And while the world seemed to be falling apart, a single man bore the weight of an empire on his shoulders. His name was Justinian. Emperor of the East. Lord of Constantinople. Ruler of an empire that still dreamed of restoring the glory of Rome, just as the universe seemed determined to destroy it all. But the cold was not his only curse. The plague struck without warning, killing millions. Cities became cemeteries. The sea turned into an enemy, a tsunami swept away the coasts. And when all seemed in ruins, Justinian did not surrender. Despite the corpses, the chaos, and the silent gods, he wrote laws, built churches, sent armies, and rebuilt his world with an iron fist. But the question remains. Was Justinian a visionary hero, or a tyrant who didn't know when to stop? A man chosen by God, or a man who wanted to be more than human? Stay, because this story will not only take you to the heart of the Byzantine Empire. It will show you how far one man can go when the entire world tells him it's impossible. He was not born in a palace. He was not raised by senators. He was not educated by the sages of Alexandria. He was born in dust, and there his ascent began. Justinian came into the world around the year 482 AD, in a remote village called Tauresium, in Dardania, a mountainous, marginal province of the Balkans. His family were peasants. They spoke Latin with a rough accent, wore coarse wool, and lived off what the land could give. Rome, to them, was a distant idea. But within that boy was a different seed. An obsession. A fire. He was adopted by his uncle Justin, an illiterate soldier who had served for years in the imperial ranks, rising to become commander of the palace guard in Constantinople. Against all odds, this same Justin would become emperor in the year 518. And with him, Justinian entered the heart of the empire. Not as a natural heir, but as an intruder determined to learn everything Rome knew. Educated in law, philosophy, theology, and military strategy, Justinian was neither the most charismatic nor the most noble, but he was the most prepared. He read voraciously. Worked without rest. His enemies said he never slept. His allies claimed he never made mistakes. During his uncle's reign, Justinian wove power from behind the curtains. He orchestrated alliances, eliminated rivals, and became the true mind of the empire. But it was not only power that defined his rise. It was also love. Because Justinian fell in love, and not with a noblewoman, but with an actress. And in Rome, that was almost the same as falling in love with a shadow. Theodora. Intelligent, sharp-tongued, fearless. Her origins were as humble as his, but her will was even fiercer. Rome did not allow marriages between royalty and actresses, legally considered prostitutes. But Justinian did not ask for permission. He moved heaven and earth to change imperial law and marry her. Together, they not only broke protocol, they created a dynasty. A new symbol. The peasant and the courtesan, as emperor and empress of the Christian world. In the year 527, Justinian placed the crown of the East upon his head. Not as the son of a dynasty. Not as the Senate's favorite. But as a man who had built it all from nothing. And with Theodora at his side, he began his reign with a promise. I will not only restore Rome. I will restore the order of the world. Before she was an empress, she was an actress. Before she was an actress, she was a prostitute. And before all that, she was invisible. Theodora was born on the margins, in the outskirts of Constantinople. The daughter of a bear trainer, she grew up among performers, shouts, and hunger. From an early age, she knew that in the empire, if you weren't born noble, your body was your only currency. She performed in minor plays. She was a jester, dancer, courtesan. Her name was a murmur in the forums and a whisper in the beds of the powerful. But she was not like the others. She watched. She learned. She knew how to listen, and how to wait. Fate took her to Egypt, where she came into contact with the Monophysites, Christians persecuted by the official dogma. There, she found something stronger than humiliation, an idea. A cause. A faith that made her unstoppable. When she returned to Constantinople, she was no longer just an actress. She was a woman awakened. And then, she met Justinian. And with him, she wrote a story no emperor had ever dared to sign. Against all law, against all imposed morality, Justinian fell in love. But Rome did not forgive love between classes. To make her his wife, he had to do something no emperor had done before, change the imperial law. Theodora was not just a consort. She was his sharpest advisor. His political shield. And, in crucial moments, his only source of courage. When the Nika riots broke out, and the palace was surrounded by tens of thousands of rebels, Justinian wanted to flee. The ships were already prepared. He was ready to escape. But it was Theodora who stopped him. "The crown is a glorious shroud," she said. "One who was born to reign must not outlive their dignity." Those words, cold, firm, eternal, sealed the fate of the city, and of the empire. After her intervention, Justinian ordered the bloodiest repression Constantinople had ever seen. And when the dust settled, the throne still stood. Thanks to her. Theodora was fire. And like all fire, she marked, burned, and transformed. She protected the most vulnerable women. She founded shelters for prostitutes. She legislated alongside her husband in favor of abandoned girls. Her compassion was not sweetness, it was a blade. It was justice born of lived pain. She died in the year 548, at the age of 58. The emperor was never the same again. His court became more rigid. His decisions, colder. His soul, more isolated. Because when Theodora's light went out, what remained on the throne was only a crowned marble. It was not a war. It was not an invasion. It was the sky, that turned against the empire. In the year 536, 9 years after ascending the throne, Emperor Justinian faced an enemy that came not from Persia, nor from Africa, nor from the Balkans. It was something vaster, older, and more relentless. The sun vanished from the sky. For more than a year, a dense cloud covered the northern hemisphere. Light turned to ash. Warmth became a memory. The seasons ceased to make sense. It snowed in summer. Harvests failed. Fields emptied. Animals died with eyes open. And hunger became the common tongue of both poor and rich. History calls it the volcanic winter. The people simply called it punishment. Modern scientists believe that 3 massive volcanic eruptions, in still debated locations, released so much sulfur into the atmosphere that the entire planet descended into a kind of prolonged night. It was the most severe climate event of the last 2,000 years. And as if the sky were not enough, the plague came. In the year 541, an unknown disease appeared in the empire's ports. The dead piled up so fast that there was no one to bury them. In Constantinople, carts carried away corpses by the thousands. Procopius, the chronicler of the reign, wrote that the stench was so dense it seemed like a thick fog. It was the bubonic plague. And in less than a decade, it annihilated almost half the population of the capital. Justinian himself fell ill. He survived, but his soul, they say, did not. His response was ruthless. He demanded taxes on the property of the dead, forced surviving peasants to continue paying as if their neighbors were still alive, and signed new inheritance laws to control the chaos. Was it coldness? Was it control? Was it desperation? And when it seemed that plague and famine could not be surpassed, the earth shook. In the year 551, Beirut, then called Berytus, was struck by a quake of brutal magnitude. A tsunami devastated the Phoenician cities. The coasts were swallowed. 30,000 dead. Hundreds of ships sunk. Merchants, craftsmen, judges, children, all swallowed by the sea. The question is inevitable. Was Justinian's reign touched by a curse? Or was he simply a man caught between the blind forces of history? Because, while everything collapsed, he did not yield. Nor abdicate. Nor break. He ruled. As if the end of the world had no permission to reach him. When flesh dies, the law remains. And when the emperor disappears, let his principles rule for him. That was Justinian's belief. A man who had seen chaos, plague, and decay. An emperor who knew that no empire can endure if it is not governed by rules. And so he set himself a titanic goal, to order all Roman law into a single work. Clear. Definitive. Eternal. Thus was born the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, also known as the Justinian Code. It was more than a book. It was an empire made of paper, ink, and judgment. It gathered the laws of past centuries, discarded the obsolete ones, reformulated the ambiguous ones, and left a legal legacy that survived his empire, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and reached our own time. Divided into 4 parts, the Code, the Digest, the Institutes, and the Novels, it encompassed all aspects of Roman life: marriage, inheritance, property, contracts, crimes, slaves, religion, the power of the state, and the rights of the citizen. The idea was simple but powerful. If people disappear, let justice not do so. If emperors change, let the law outlast them. Many considered it a divine work. Others, an instrument of control. But everyone knew it was not a mere compilation. It was a manifesto. An imperial declaration: the empire might be in ruins, but the law would rebuild it. For centuries, the Justinian Code was the foundation of Byzantine law. In the Middle Ages, it inspired the formation of canon law. And later, it influenced the modern laws of Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and all of Latin America. Today, more than 1,000 years later, we still sign contracts, hold trials, and claim rights, in the long shadows of Justinian. Rome has not died. Rome is only asleep, and I will make her awaken. That's what Justinian would repeat in the halls of his palace, while the maps of the world were drawn and erased over and over again. Because this emperor did not only want to defend his empire, he wanted to rebuild what had already been lost. And for that, he needed a genius of war. His name was Belisarius. A relentless commander, young, brilliant, and loyal. With him, Justinian launched the most ambitious military campaign since the times of Caesar and Augustus. First, they defeated the powerful Vandal kingdom in North Africa. Then, they launched a campaign in Italy against the Ostrogoths. Rome, Naples, Ravenna, one by one, the ancient jewels of the Western Empire were taken back. For a moment, the dream seemed to be fulfilled. The Mediterranean became once again a mare nostrum. The old provinces of the dead empire now obeyed Constantinople. But glory had a price. The wars lasted for years. Taxes increased. The plague, still present, decimated both soldiers and citizens. The recovered territories, though symbolically valuable, were devastated, difficult to govern, and even harder to defend. And despite everything, Justinian insisted. He ordered the construction of fortresses, reorganized borders, appointed governors. He believed that with willpower, an empire could be reborn whole. But not everyone shared his vision. Some said his ambition was not heroic, but suicidal. Rome was recovered, but also sacked, destroyed by the fighting, and abandoned by much of its population. North Africa was reconquered, but soon fell into chaos. And the endless struggle drained Constantinople's resources. Justinian won battles, but sowed ruins. He revived an empire, but mortgaged its soul. The emperor believed his glory would justify the means. But for many, his victory was an empty echo. A reflection of a past that could no longer be resurrected. History was not written for women like her. And yet, she forced history to remember her. Theodora was not born an empress. She was born in misery. The daughter of a bear keeper at the circus, she grew up among the mud of Constantinople's popular theaters, where actresses were seen as prostitutes and women as disposable objects. From a young age, she became an actress, dancer, acrobat, and something more, an observer. Because while she entertained the powerful, she learned how power worked. She was mocked, used, marginalized. But never broken. She left the stage and embarked on a spiritual journey to Alexandria, where she embraced Monophysitism, a Christian current persecuted by the empire, and developed a strong religious and political conviction. Upon returning to Constantinople, her path crossed with Justinian's. He, the heir to the empire. She, the stain everyone wanted to erase. But Justinian saw what no one else did. Intelligence. Resolve. Vision. He loved her. Made her his wife. And to do so, he changed imperial law. The court fell silent and the people were scandalized. An actress as empress? But Theodora refused to be reduced to the role of consort. She ruled. She decided. She influenced. She led. At her side, Justinian did not reign alone. When the Nika revolt, the worst crisis of his reign, erupted, the Senate urged him to flee. Justinian trembled. The rebels were burning the city. But it was Theodora who rose on the throne and spoke the words that changed history. Purple makes a glorious shroud. I prefer to die as an empress than live as a fugitive. Her words cooled her husband's fear. Justinian ordered the revolt crushed. And he did so with a brutality that ended any future threat. Theodora not only saved the empire. She reformed laws in favor of women, promoted rights for prostitutes, protected persecuted nuns, and confronted the high patriarchs who despised her. She was, perhaps, the most powerful woman of the first millennium. And when she died in 548, Justinian was never the same again. Everything that rises, wears down. And even the greatest emperors end up alone. After Theodora's death, Justinian aged. But he did not abdicate. He ruled alone, increasingly locked within himself, as if the empire now existed only inside his mind. He spent hours meditating, writing, reviewing laws, dictating decrees. His body weakened, but his mind remained relentless. He lived surrounded by maps, manuscripts, and ghosts. Isolated from the people, distrustful of the generals, cautious with the Senate. He was no longer the emperor who dreamed of reconquering Rome. He was the emperor who feared losing even Constantinople. External enemies pressed in. The borders were fragile. The plague never fully disappeared. But he remained, firm. Stubborn. As if his will alone could hold up the foundations of a world he no longer understood. And yet, that world owed him much. When Justinian died in 565, he had ruled for almost 40 years. He was the last emperor to speak Latin as his native language. The last to attempt to rebuild the entire Roman Empire. And the last to leave a mark so deep it would reach our own time. His enemies called him a despot. His allies, a visionary. History could not decide. But the truth is that without Justinian, Europe would be different. His laws, his architecture, his wars, his ambition, marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Today, when we look at the ruins of Hagia Sophia, when we study law, when we speak of Theodora, when we read about the Byzantine Empire, the echo of his voice still resonates. And that echo, even if it sometimes sounds like a tyrant, still holds something of an emperor. Justinian died on the throne, but never left the soul of his empire. He was loved and hated. Judged for centuries. But in the end, he he was remembered. And that, for an emperor, is more important than victory. If this story made you reflect, subscribe and turn on the bell. On this channel, we unearth the echoes of the past to understand the present. From Rome to Byzantium, from tyrants to visionaries, here the ancient stones still have a voice. Tell me in the comments. Was Justinian a hero, or a fanatic for power? And if you want more empires, conspiracies, and fallen emperors, I'll be waiting for you in the next video.